Just put the microphone here and then
And welcome to our fourth workshop in a five-part series. We are thrilled to see so many here today. This has been a really well-received series. I am thrilled to be introducing you today. Shauna walked off an airplane about 4 hours ago, and she has been gone for several days. So I said I would do the introduction, she'll do the wrap-up. So we have been recording these workshops on Wavecam for anyone who missed it or would like to review it. And we understand that lots of people have been going back and listening to different speakers. So that will be an option for today. Today we are looking at independent and assisted living, CCRCs, continuing care retirement communities, and the topic of memory care. We have two panelists with us this morning. Michelle Woodbury. She is a co-owner of Two Sisters Senior Living Advisors, a local senior care consulting and referral service. Also joining us is Lori Cashman. She is the Director of Education for the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association. First, please welcome Michelle Woodbury. And I'd like to say that in addition to co-owning Two Sisters Senior Living, she's a certified senior advisor, a certified dementia practitioner, as well as an experienced public speaker. Michelle has presented at conferences for the Alzheimer's Association, the Massachusetts Councils on Aging, the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association, and others. Michelle's father has been living with Parkinson's disease for over a decade. She is passionate about helping families meet their aging goals. She helps to manage her dad's and her family's needs. Of the things for which Michelle feels most grateful is the opportunity to work and own a business with her best sister and friend, Allison Powers. Please welcome Michelle Woodbury.
Good morning. How is everybody today?
Good.
I'm sorry to keep you inside on such a beautiful morning, but let me see what time it is so I can keep myself in check. Okay.
I'll still go like this.
Great.
About 12 minutes.
Wonderful. So my name is Michelle, and my company, Two Sisters Senior Living Advisors, is in its 12th year. We've been advising people on what the different options are and how to make the decision, well, for 12 years. And so what I'm going to talk about today is the information that I've accumulated in those 12 years and what information would be most helpful for you. And we're going to hold our questions till the end, yes? Okay. So I want to boil this down. I like to boil it down to its most simplest essence. I think reducing it is what it's called, but I'm not a cook. So when we look at what options are available in Massachusetts, like I said, really simplified, there are only 3 types of options in Massachusetts that somebody can live if they cannot live at home independently. One of those is at home, and you can bring services in. You can have family support. There's a number of ways to stay at home, and there's some limitations to it as well, but that is one place that somebody can live if you can't live alone independently. The second category is what I call a private pay community care setting. My P's are really emphasized. Private pay community care setting, and that includes the CCRCs, the continuing care retirement communities, independent living, assisted living, memory care. Most of the rest homes are in this bucket. Anywhere that you need to move out if you've run out of money is in this second bucket. And the third is nursing home care. Now, nursing homes do 2 things. One is short-term rehab, and the other is long-term care, long-term. Now, most do both. Some just do one or the other, but we're talking about long-term in this circumstance. So that's usually the least desirable options. When I talk to people about what their aging goals are, and we talk through that, I've only heard the same ones over and over for the last 12 years. So one is I want to stay at home forever. This is where I'm going to be, and I want to stay home. 2 is I never want to go to a nursing home. 3 is if a couple, we need to stay together. Or, you know, in the case of my parents, when can we live separately? And, you know, still happily married, but very, very grateful for their own space. So, those are the main categories, and if nursing home is the least desirable, then let's answer the question, why would somebody live in a nursing home long term? Why are the reasons that somebody needs a long-term skilled nursing facility? There's only 2. One is if, and it's important that I put down the right finger this time. One is if your care needs cannot be met in any other setting. They can't be met at home, they can't be met in assisted living, and there aren't that many of those in, you know, I'm sure that we can talk about this a little bit more too, but assisted living is not a black and white term. There's a whole spectrum of different assisted living options. Some provide just a little bit of care, dressing assistance, and really it's more of a social environment, and that's the same with independent living and the continuing care retirement communities. It's it's less of a need-driven decision and more of something people want to do, and then assisted living and nursing home care. So the other reason why somebody needs to live in a nursing home long term is if they can't afford the care they need in any other setting. So if you cannot afford to stay home, and that is usually the primary limitation that people have in staying home is financial. And so if you can't afford the care you need in any other setting, then you can go on to Mass Health when you qualify. And there's 2 ways to qualify. One is financial. You need to speak to your elder law attorney about that. That is not the hat that I wear. And the second is medical. You need to have care needs in order to qualify to go into a nursing home on Mass Health. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Otherwise, if care needs can be met somewhere else and you have the finances to support for a number of years at least, then it is worth looking at an assisted living, even as a backup plan. You can want to stay home, but that isn't an answer. Like I put my seatbelt on, so when I drive, I don't intend to get into an accident, but if I do, I hope it will minimize the impact. If I didn't and I just drove around without a seatbelt on, then what would happen if the worst happens is it would be even worse. So my suggestion is, visit and tour some assisted livings if that is within your budget, your financial means, and have a backup plan. Just looking at them and exploring this does not mean you need to move now. So many people call me and they want to work with me, but they say, I'm just not ready yet. Yeah, you are. I'm not telling you you're ready to move, but you are ready to plan. And so that's my shtick. It's better to have a plan in place and not need one than to need a plan and not have one. So that's what I think is, and if you're going to avoid, if you want to stay home, you have to look at your budget, look at what you're currently spending, and then look at how much care would be on top of that. And then calculate how long that you would be able to maintain that on your assets that are not in your home, if that happens to be the case, which is fairly frequent. And sometimes all the assets are in the home, in which case that makes home difficult because you need that money in order to pay for the care, which is, again, why assisted living can really be a big benefit. It's less expensive than the other options. A continuing care retirement community is essentially continuing care. So what that means is usually in almost all circumstances there's a buy-in. You pay a certain amount of money and it's an entry fee and it's like you have a condo. And you are independent. They have meals, they have some activities, they have housekeeping, but generally speaking, you're on your own. And then if you need more help, you can either bring it in from a home care agency for a while or you can move to the assisted living part of their building. Some of them have some price advantages because of the buy-in, or at least availability advantages. And then if somebody needs more care than their assisted living provides, they can move into the nursing home. and most of them accept Medicaid. There are some that don't, so this whole continuum still ends with a private, there are my P's again, privately paying in a nursing home, if that is what becomes needed. So CCRCs, there are rental independent living communities. I happen to prefer those just based on the fact that most of my clients already have some care needs, and the rental independent living are often attached to an assisted living and memory care as well, but they're a little bit more flexible in terms of moving from one to the other, as well as keeping couples together. And I think I'll wrap up by just saying that, memory care, one of the things that I like is, and I'm thinking about maybe I could do a training for you guys, but one of the things that I notice is the language, particularly that the salespeople use. And I've been a memory care director. I'm an activities director by background. That's what I do. I love to do this. So when I tour with people, I notice certain things right away. And when all of the marketing directors talk, they say, well, when your loved one needs memory care, then we have that neighborhood available. Let me show you some units, da 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 da. I want to challenge them to not say need, but say benefit. Your loved one will benefit from memory care when X, Y, or Z, because I think there's so much more value to a memory care neighborhood than it just being secure. Memory care is secure so that people can't come and go on their own because they have memory impairment. That makes their safety awareness, it means that they have a lack of safety awareness and they can't be left alone. But a memory care neighborhood offers so much more. The programming, the way everything is custom tailored to each resident, and bringing out the truest essence of who they were as a person, and engaging them, there's so much more involved. And a lot of it, especially the newer ones, have like fancy lights that change during the day for circadian rhythms and all sorts of design features that are wonderful. So it's not just when people need it. I have experienced this over and over and over and over and over again, that people are resistant and nervous about moving into memory care, and in almost every circumstance they are so glad that they chose to do that, because it is a big benefit for somebody who is losing their cognitive ability. And we're holding questions to the end, so I will pass this along.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I did mention that Lori is the Director of Education for the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association. She has spent her career serving the older adult population in several capacities. She's been a case manager in the state home care system, a senior center COA director, and just prior to the Massachusetts ALA team, she spent 12 years as an executive director in an assisted living. She is also an adjunct professor in the community college system and teaches gerontology, psychology, and human services. I dare say she sleeps about 1 to 2 hours a night. Please welcome Lori Cashman.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for welcoming me here today. It's a pleasure to be here on this lovely day. And I echo Michelle's sentiments. Too bad we have to be inside. It is beautiful out there. But with the beauty comes some allergy things, so I'm dealing with that. So I beg your forgiveness if I cough or whatever as I'm talking. As Julie mentioned, I was an executive director in an assisted living community for 12 years. It was probably, for me, it was the highlight of my career. And I am so convinced that the assisted living setting is just perfect for people who are appropriate for that setting. So Michelle gave you a little bit of an idea of what you can expect in assisted living versus skilled nursing and so on. But I think probably the best way I can describe it, or I can start to explain to you a little bit about assisted living, is to share with you some stories that I've had the pleasure to be part of as I was an executive director in assisted living. So I think it was probably my second year as an executive director, and we had a gentleman who was moving in, Mr. LaValle. He was not crazy about the idea of coming to assisted living. It just wasn't his thing. He wanted to stay home. He wanted to be able to be in his own home and do his own thing. But his son wanted him to be in assisted living because the son was concerned about him, especially during the winter. We had just come off of the winter months, and Mr. LaValle's home was difficult to get into. He was getting Meals on Wheels, and he was getting some services in his home, but the sidewalks were icy, and there were different challenges that were part of his being at home and living alone. So he went along with his son's request to move into assisted living, and we met and we did the assessment, and he had the tour. And on the day of move-in, Mr. LaValle came in and he had a little handheld suitcase, and he walked in the front door and he said, "Okay, folks, this is it. Here I am. Next stop, Shady Rest Cemetery."
Oh.
And I said, "Oh, Mr. LaValle, you've got a lot of living to do between now and then."
Yeah.
And you know, that's one of the things that we find most interesting about assisted living is that, you know, as we age, we want to add years to our lives. When you're in assisted living and it's a good fit, you add life to your years. And I can assure you that that is definitely the case. There were people who were in their own homes during the pandemic, and their health declined, many of them because they were isolated. One of the benefits of assisted living is you have a neighborhood, you have a community right within your building. And there are people there to provide you support, and you can go and talk with people and have community activities and things going on. So you're not isolated, you're not alone, you're not living just questioning what's going to happen tomorrow. You know what's going to happen tomorrow. There are things that are planned, there are things that are going on. And there's another situation I'll share with you. Mrs. Simonelli, Mr. and Mrs. Simonelli lived in a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in my community, and Mr. Simonelli passed away. And they had been living there about 6 years, and they had 4 sons, and the 4 sons and their wives wanted to take Mrs. Simonelli home for a couple of weeks to be able to help her through the grieving process, as many times we often do. We don't want to be alone. Mrs. Simonelli said, "This is my home.
Oh.
I want to stay here. All my neighbors are here." She had neighbors that were coming and going from her apartment. There were people that were around her, her friends that she had become acquainted with, and that's her kind of a new family. It doesn't replace her family, but it's her actually her area of meaningful ties, meaningful connections, people who could support her during her time of grieving the loss of her husband. And there were people coming and going from her apartment at all hours. There were times I would walk by the dining room, it was after dinner, and she'd be sitting there with a couple of her neighbors. They'd be having coffee and talking, and they were providing support to her in ways that her family might not have been able to, because they were busy working, they had careers, they had children, so she was happy to just stay right in her home. So that's one of the things that is so beneficial about assisted living. It is not really a medical setting, it is a social model, okay? So when I say that, what I mean is that it doesn't provide the level of service that you would find in a skilled nursing community. You can't have dressings changed on your wounds. There are a number of things that you just can't have in assisted living. However, the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association right now is advocating for the passage of a bill that has been in the state legislature. It's called the Common Sense Health Bill. So what that does is it allows people to stay in assisted living even when they might have a skilled need that would really not require that they leave, but because of the regulations and because of the skills not being able to be provided in that setting, they would have to leave. I'll give you an example. I had a resident who came back from having cataract surgery. Our staff, because we are not a medical model and because we're not licensed to do so, as many of you may know, when you have cataract surgery, you have to have eye drops put in your eyes after surgery. Our staff couldn't do that for her. If her family was not able to come and administer those eye drops, she would have had to go to skilled care. That doesn't make sense to have someone, just because they need eye drops administered, that they would have to go to a nursing home. A nursing home is appropriate for people who need those services and who need the services that are provided on an ongoing basis for people who cannot live in any other setting. For example, we had another resident who, John, he was a very nice guy, but he had some memory issues, but everything was going okay. We were working with it, everything was fine. There was one night, 1 o'clock in the morning, I got a call. I happened to live 5 minutes away from the community where I was the executive director. I got a call, they said John is missing. Then I got another call from the emergency room up the street. John was at the emergency room. So what happened was, it was a very hot August summer night. John was found out walking on the road, one of the main roads in the area, and he was picked up by the police and brought to the emergency room. He was wearing 3 layers of clothing on this hot, hot summer night. His daughter-in-law happened to be the nurse, one of the nurses in the emergency room that night. So I left my house and went and tried to take care of things. What ended up happening was it became apparent to us that John was no longer appropriate for this setting. Because in assisted living, you can come and go as you please. That's the whole philosophy behind assisted living, is that you are able to make as many independent choices as possible that would be similar to what you would have in your own home, while still accessing the protection and the services and the security that an assisted living community offers. So, but what happened with John, because we don't have that one-on-one care in assisted living, he suddenly became appropriate for skilled nursing. He was in danger of leaving the building and not being able to be watched or kept safe. So what we had to do, we had to make sure we had staff to be able to be with him around the clock when his family couldn't be there, while his family found a skilled nursing facility that was appropriate for him. It was tough to do this because this man was thriving in assisted living, but we couldn't keep him safe. So one of the things that will be required of people in assisted living is that you can be safe behind closed doors, that you're not going to be wandering out in the middle of a snowstorm. We had one resident, she was doing fine. We didn't realize that she had cognitive issues. Suddenly, she was walking out the front door at 10:30 on a Sunday night in her nightgown during a snowstorm, looking for her 4-year-old son, who was actually now 69 years old. And the family didn't want her to leave. They didn't want her to go to a skilled nursing facility. They loved having her in the assisted living community, but we couldn't keep her safe. So that was the problem. And it's a difficult conversation to have with people and with family members, but we like to refer to it as a gentle move. In other words, if you see things coming down the pike, in assisted living, we would meet every morning and go down the list of residents, making sure that we were updated on everything that was going on with each person on a day-to-day basis. And you can kind of see if someone starts to fall a lot, or if someone is having cognitive issues where they're not staying in their apartment at the appropriate times, they're going into other people's apartments, they're leaving the building and walking off into the woods. Those are situations where you can kind of see them coming as they're coming. In other situations, like with John's, we couldn't see it coming. He just left the building one night and he was out in the middle of the road. But we like to have it be so that before someone has to leave, that they can actually have a plan in place about where they might go. And like Michelle talked about, a plan. That's important to have. Even when you're considering going into assisted living, it's a lot of times people will wait until the very end when it's like more crisis driven. And suddenly we need to do something with mom because she can't be home alone. We're all trying to spend the night with her and make sure she's safe. We don't know what to do. And it's all of a sudden people are just in a panic trying to find a place to live. I would recommend that you do it kind of in a more slow, planned, more strategic fashion, where you have a chance to go and look around. If you want to know if an assisted living community would be good for you, I recommend you contact them, you take a tour, have them show you around. There are plenty of questions to ask, and they would come up as you go along. But one of the things that are important to obviously the most important thing at the beginning is, can they meet the needs of this person who would be living in assisted living? Would this person be safe behind closed doors if they weren't being watched and monitored 24 hours a day? They have safety checks, they have service plans for the provision of care, but people need to be safe behind a closed door. They need to be able to spend time alone without being in jeopardy of anything happening to them. Also, you want to know about cost. Roughly speaking, assisted living communities cost anywhere between $5,000 and $8,000 per month. There are some people who go to assisted living for social reasons only. There are other people who go because they need assistance with meal preparation. They can't really prepare their meals anymore. They can't do grocery shopping. They need some assistance with bathing, perhaps. But it varies, and it's one of those things where you don't really know when you look at the assisted living residents on the surface. It's hard to tell who's there just for social reasons, who's there to get as much help as they can possibly get, and who's there kind of just teetering on the brink of needing more than the assisted living community can provide, but they're trying to be able to meet their needs and keep them safe. So when the way things look on the surface, it's very difficult to tell. So I recommend that you go and you take a tour, you ask these important questions. So one of the things that that we have available through the state. It's called the Consumer Guide, and I believe, that Shauna, you said you have copies. So this guide is put out by the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. They have all kinds of information about what you should ask about when you go to tour an assisted living community, different checklists to see what needs do you have, what needs are being met by family that they want to continue to meet those needs, what needs would have to be met by the community, and different goals that you would have. And again, like Michelle said, when you go into a community, they want to know about your personality. They want to know what's important to you. When you go into an assisted living community, they develop a service plan based upon what you need for care. They factor in what you like to do outside of your home, what hobbies you have, what's your favorite color, what's your favorite meal, what's your life like. And it does bring life to your years when you live in assisted living, because they're factoring in a care plan that's developed specifically for you, just for you, and to be able to meet your needs and to make sure that you're living the best life you can live. There are people who have met spouses and partners in the assisted living community after they've moved in, thinking that they've never, this was like Mr. LaValle said, next stop Shady Rest Cemetery. There was a whole lot more living for him to do. It's been just such a pleasure to watch from an executive director standpoint, to be involved in the community, to see people really thriving. Their lives have just taken on another meaning through a new chapter that they've had in this assisted living community that they probably didn't expect to have, because they thought, okay, well, this is kind of like a nursing home, but it's not. It's really not. It's more like it's like housing with services. It's a lovely apartment. Many of them look like a beautiful hotel. And they have services that will enable people to be as independent as possible for as long as possible. And even people that have a mild cognitive impairment, they would do well to come into assisted living at a time in the early stages of their cognitive development. And I'll share another story with you about a woman named Rita. She came into the assisted living community, and she had some mild cognitive impairment. She couldn't remember many things, but she fit into the community. She had friends who would talk with her, and she was enjoying life, and everybody was just kind of looking past the little things that she wasn't remembering. But as she aged, now this woman, by the time she left the community, you could see her going downhill in terms of her cognitive impairment, but she was still thriving in this community. She would leave the dining room after just having had a lovely meal, and if you said, Rita, what did you have for dinner today? She couldn't remember what she had for dinner. But she knew where to go when it was time to leave the dining room. She knew which button to press to get to her apartment. She knew when it was time to go to the activities. She would sit out on the front porch and have ice cream with everyone. She was thriving in this community where if she was home, she would have had to go into a nursing home because she couldn't have made the transition from independent living to assisted living comfortably given her memory impairment. So the sooner you can get into assisted living, even with a small amount of cognitive impairment, the better off you're going to be, because as you age in that environment, it becomes part of your routine and part of your structure, and you could just go with the flow that you've become accustomed to. But to make that decision at a time when your cognitive status is not good makes it that much more difficult. So I think that just about wraps up my portion of it. And we'll be happy to take questions when it's time, but I'll turn it over to Shauna.
Lori, could you first just talk a little bit about the Assisted Living Association and what resources are available through that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association, we have we exist really as a trade association for the assisted living industry in Massachusetts. We provide education and advocacy and support. So my role, I set up all of the trainings that are required by the state, and additional trainings also for people in the assisted living community so that they can get trained properly. The state requires certain trainings to be held every year, and I assist in making sure that everyone has access to those trainings. We also offer other trainings that are just for nurses, some that are just for chefs, some that are just for building maintenance people in assisted living. We cover the gamut of all of the services that are provided in assisted living, educating those staff people. We also do advocacy. As I mentioned, the Common Sense Health bill that's before the legislature right now. So our president and CEO, Brian Doherty, he works very, very diligently with the board at MassAlla and with lobbyists and attorneys to go to the State House and advocate for this bill to be passed, so that if someone is a diabetic in assisted living and they need their blood sugars monitored on a daily basis to know how much insulin to take, normally that would require you go to live in a nursing home.
Jesus.
And that's just so silly, because if you're doing well and you have no other impairments, why would you not want to stay in assisted living? It's a beautiful setting, and if your needs are able to be met in every other way, no one should have to leave just because they need help monitoring their blood sugars. So this bill is something that's before the legislature. So during the pandemic, we advocated for these skills to be able to be provided in the assisted living setting, although it's not part of the regulations. So the state offered that flexibility. People were able to change bandages, check blood pressures, check blood glucose levels, put in eye drops, things like that, things that we normally wouldn't be able to do in assisted living. So now today, as we are terminating the public health emergency, those skilled services, that flexibility would have terminated today if the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association had not advocated for the extension of that flexibility. So the state, in their kindness and their grace, as they try to work through this to be able to do something permanent, they've extended those flexibilities through March of next year. So assisted living communities can still provide those level of services that would normally require people to leave, no longer, at least for now, until it hopefully will get past long term. We also support the assisted living industry. Throughout the pandemic, there were different notices that were coming out from the CDC and from the Department of Public Health and from the state, all these different things that assisted living communities were required to do. You need to wear masks at this time, you need to provide outdoor space for this visitation, you need to do this, do that, and the other. And it was so much information. So what we would do, we would take all the state information and I would boil it down to bullet points and send it out to our members and say, here's what you need to know. This is an 11-page document from the CDC. These are the 5 important things you need to know. You need to wear masks during dining, you need to do surveillance testing, you need to make sure that you're screening staff, things like that. And then if you want to read more detailed information, here's the full document that was sent out by the CDC or the Department of Public Health or the State Executive Office of Elder Affairs. So we educate, advocate, and support the assisted living community.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you to Michelle and to Lori for great presentations. And now we will open it up to questions. Susan.
Thank you, John. Hi, thank you very much for 2 wonderful presentations. Can you hear me in the back? Yes. Good. I recently ran into a friend who said she wants to move into assisted living, but her husband does not. And I think this is a fairly familiar scenario. And she said the lawn is keeping him alive. In other words, he works on the lawn, and that's what's keeping him alive. I have a similar situation. How do you deal with obstinate spouses?
I don't know if you have the trick to that.
Okay, so I guess you deal with an obstinate spouse when you're 70 the same way you do when you're 30, but I'm not really sure how to do that. So, but I think, so that's a scenario that I have seen many times in assisted living. We have a situation where a couple will come in, the husband is not necessarily that much in need of anything, but the wife needs more, or vice versa. Usually they work with the families. In fact, I have a friend who is in marketing and admissions for an assisted living community right now. She had a husband and wife who just moved in the other day. The husband doesn't want to stay. The wife wants to stay because she's appropriate. So the family is trying to encourage them because the husband has his own issues that are preventing them from being at home safely. So the family has worked with the couple and with the community to say, let's just give this a try. Let's see how it goes. Many times people want to come into the assisted living community for someone else, and they end up finding out that it's really good for them too. And you know, even when people are reluctant, I remember we had one lady, Ruth, she came in, she moved in, and she said to me, I don't want to be here. My daughter wants me here. She thinks I should be here, so I'm coming to keep her happy, but I don't want to be here. I said, that's okay, Ruth. I said, we're going to do things so that you can do as many things here as you would at home, as much as possible. She said, well, I like to cook. I said, okay, bring your recipes, do your cooking. You can have access to the main kitchen because we didn't have cooktops in the apartments. So she brought like 15 recipes, and in fact, I still have them at my house. She gave them to me. But anyway, she's, about maybe 2 months after she moved in, I saw her in the dining room, and I said, Ruth, what have you made? Have you made your ham and lentil soup yet? She said, oh, for goodness sake. She said, I'm tired of cooking. She said, they let me help in the kitchen. They let me do something in the kitchen up here. She said, I've given up. She said, here, in fact, you come back to my apartment after lunch. I'm going to give you my recipes. I still have them. I kid you not. But she just wanted to know that she could do it if she wanted to. And that was her reassurance. I said, Ruth, you can do whatever you want. Let's just make sure you do it in a way that's safe for you and it's safe for everybody else. But no one's going to say, no, Ruth, you can't do this. So you try to make it as independent as possible and to give people as many choices as possible.
Can I answer too?
Please.
So from where I sit and what I do is I coach people through this process and help them figure out what the best fit is. But in my experience, one of the things that works really well is saying this is going to be a backup plan. We're not moving anywhere. We don't have to go anywhere, but I'd like to have a backup plan because if something happens to you, I want to know what you want me to do about it. If something happens to me, I want you to know what I want you to do about it. And we may not be able to stay home, so come up with a backup plan. From there, many of the communities offer a trial stay. It's called a respite. Most of the time it's a month long, and if you have a spouse who might be resistant, at some point just say, hey, can we go for a trial stay? What I'd like to do is just find out if this is the place that we want to go when the time comes.
Yeah.
We don't have to move in permanently. We don't have to sell the house. Let's just go try it for a month. And I know they are like beautiful hotels, but they're a little bit like docked cruise ships. Really, and
You're absolutely right.
some of them are really nice. So let's go try it out. In my experience, 12 years, and I was doing this before, but not in my own company, almost everybody, by a huge landslide amount, chooses to stay after a trial stay. Because similar things happen. They're holding on to something like the lawn, and once they realize they've tried it. So let me tell you something that I learned a long time ago that has stuck with me. And it will make sense. Nobody is going to make a major life change or spend a lot of money, and these are both, until the perceived value of what they're going to get outweighs the risk of what they're giving up.
There you go.
Now, it's really difficult as human beings, if not maybe even impossible, to imagine the good things that are going to happen for something that we haven't experienced. We can only imagine the scary things, the things that might come up that we're worried about. So that's why the trial stays are so effective. Because the best way to help you see the value in, or to perceive the value in an assisted living is to try it out. Then you don't have to try very hard. As soon as someone goes in there, well, sometimes it takes a couple weeks, but as soon as somebody moves in, they realize how much better life is than it was before, and that is the tactic that I see as most successful.
Thank you, that answers my question.
Yes.
Excellent.
I think also it's finding the right assisted living. We've been talking more in general terms, but not all assisted livings are the same, and they all have different personalities, different services, and I think it's going and asking the questions and finding the right place for you.
Can I, this again, just for
Sure,
a minute?
and we have a few other questions too.
I don't mean to hog the microphone, but a couple of years ago, two friends of mine and I decided to go just look around. And we went to 12 or 15 different places. And I have to echo your sentiment, Shauna. Everyone is different. They're different in terms of their financial setup, what they're asking of you, what they do and what they don't do. And so it really is important to go see things. But what I want to know is, does anybody have a lawn that my husband can take me to?
Can I speak to that real quick? Okay, so I just want to speak to what she says. And when you visited all 15 of those places, was that a fun experience for you?
Yeah.
It was? Okay, good. Most people don't give you that answer. But if it's fun and you like going on these tours, go on them. But what I think is beneficial is working, whether it's with a company like mine or a geriatric care manager or the outreach workers at the Council on Aging, is to pare that down. There's only, ideally you'll tour 4 or 5 places. And then, because they're a good fit for your budget, they're a good fit for your care needs, and they're a good fit for where you're hoping and your lifestyle. And if you don't find something, then you can look at something else. But I want to point out that, like I said earlier, assisted living is a spectrum. So what that means is that some assisted livings can provide much higher levels of care than other assisted livings can. And it's the way that they staff correlates to how they price. So we can talk about the difference in the models and which one might be better suited to you. And if somebody is looking to never move again, what does that look like versus someone who wants to move into a community now and have a independent, vibrant lifestyle that's more independent, but then is willing to move again when they need more care. So I think that hopefully addresses that further too.
Can I just say one thing too, in addition to that? There are many communities that will allow people, such as your husband, to assist with outdoor things. With, I know for my community, when I was there, we had a garden, and I would tell everyone every spring, go and pick out the area that you want us to till. You can plant your garden. You can do whatever you want to do. You can help with the lawn. There are all different types of situations that can be set up. And Michelle mentioned about the spectrum and about finances. There are communities that actually have a tax credit program whereby you can go into this assisted living community and have and qualify for a program where you can have part of your rent paid by this program, and it extends your assets longer. There are others that have what's called the GAFC program, and that goes through the Mass Health system, and a portion of the rent is paid through that. There are some, and in those situations, both of those situations, the nice part about it is when you spent down your money, like, so for example, if you go into assisted living and you have $100,000 in your account and you pay for your assisted living care through that time and you start to run out of money, you won't have to leave the community. You can stay in that community if you get on that program. Not every assisted living community offers this financial arrangement, but there are many that do. But there's also an opportunity for veterans. Veterans can also get, it's called aid and assistance. There's a certain portion of the rent that might be paid through the VA for people who want to live in assisted living. So like Michelle said, it runs the gamut from everything you can think of really with assisted living. There are many different setups, and really the important thing is, like this woman said, go and visit and check and see what is the feel, what is the personality. Some feel warm, some feel more home-like, others feel like more extravagant, like an extravagant hotel. Every place has its feel. Every place has its like the character. When you walk into the building, you feel something. So I would encourage you to just go around and look in the areas that you feel would be most comfortable. If you're from around this area, look for assisted living communities around this area. But it's worth it to make the time to do it. One more thing I would like to mention before you go. So we have, the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association has this resource guide, and we publish it every year. And Shauna has some copies of it here, and there's good information in it if you'd like to look at that.
Including my company.
Yes.
We're
yes,
in there.
They're in there too. And like I said, Shauna has copies of the Executive Office of Elder Affairs Consumer Guide that has a really specific checklist. So that's...
And also, our outreach coordinator, who I'll introduce in a second, Maura Snyder, also can answer some of those questions for you as well. And I think there was a question back here. So we're going to scoot over.
I think Michelle mentioned that there was a preference for rental versus buy-in. And I think that sounds to me like a good model, but it's not the common one for what's available around here. How do you get a list of what the rental, why do you prefer the rental versus buy-in?
I was hoping you were going to ask that question.
Yeah, all right, well, go ahead.
That was the question I was waiting for. Thank you. So she asked why rental option might be better than a continuing care option. And I just want to say that neither one is better or the other, but it depends on what you're looking for and what your needs are. In my experience, most of the people who call me already have a care need, or their spouse does. And one of the concerns that I think happens when people move into a continuing care community is they think that they're going to be able to stay together, and that's the benefit to this continuum, and that's not untrue. But it is a little bit more difficult. So for example, my parents were in an independent living community prior to COVID, and my dad needed more care, but he didn't want to move to the enhanced care or the assisted living floor of this place that they were at. If he had, my mother would have downsized the apartment she had, but they put down this amount of money, and she wouldn't get that back right away. They would owe money on both the apartments until they re-rented the two-bedroom that my parents were in, and my dad would be paying privately for the assisted living. So and luckily I foresaw that this was going to come, and it wasn't their forever move. It was their next move. And then when things got more complicated, we moved them out to the rentals. If there's a rental assisted living that offers independent living, many of the same things are offered. The apartments are a little smaller. There may be more cultural events and things like that at a CCRC. But the big advantage to a rental is that if there's a couple and you're in the same apartment, in most circumstances, the assisted living can change the care that you need in your apartment. And two people can live in the same apartment and have very different needs. Unless, of course, memory care becomes an issue, and then at least they're in the same building. And it's just a little bit more fluid. But there is a whole spectrum of different assisted livings, and some of them are more like apartments, and they're more affordable, and some of them are, especially the newer ones.
They're beautiful.
Oh my God, I would have never predicted that the industry would have come out with places like this to live. But it depends on what your goal is and what your intention is, and that's something that I can help you figure out what your goal is, and then give you more information about those different options.
Thank you, Michelle. And Francine, you had a question? I'm going to right over here. I feel like a talk show host.
For those of us who are very busy taking continuing education courses and members of health clubs, and I'm in a chorus, and there are some people who are in bands, what continuing education options are there? Or do you have to find them on your own and commute to them from the assisted living?
Can you do it? Sure.
Who would like to answer that, Michelle?
I'm the talker. I talk for a living. I love talking. There are assisted living communities and continuing care retirement communities that have all of those things. They have their own radio, they have their own television station, they have their own, they have all sorts of different things. They offer, outings to things, but yeah, everything that you mentioned is available. In fact, there's a CCRC in Newton that is affiliated with LaSalle College. And the residents who move into that community are required to take a certain number of are required to audit a certain number of college credit classes each year. I'm not sure how they track that or make sure that it happens, but there's a lot of opportunity for people. The best compliment that I have ever received from somebody about assisted living, and I was the activities director, so I thought it was a compliment about me, is she said, "You helped open a new chapter to a book that I thought was closed."
That's perfect.
Yes. And so these things that you're talking about, we want them. Those are things that open your next chapter for you. So if you're looking at assisted living communities, for example, that don't offer that, you're looking at the wrong places.
Any other questions?
Okay. Gary?
I don't think I need them.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Did you address the situation of availability or lack of availability of qualified staff? And two, the 5-year waits that are
Yeah,
common in this area?
I want to go.
That's one of the things that the Massachusetts Assisted Living Association is well aware of, and we've been promoting workforce development and assisted living community careers as a rewarding and gratifying profession. So we are working very hard to promote this and to be able to support communities in acquiring staff. In fact, we have our different trainings that we have coming up to help people to help assisted living communities to attract quality staff and retain them. And it's not just the assisted living industry that's affected, as you probably know. It's the healthcare industry as a whole, and the economy, even on a larger scale, is we're having trouble with getting qualified, dependable staff in just about every aspect of society. It's a strange situation that we're in. I don't recall ever seeing it before, but I'm hoping that we can get to the bottom of it and maybe work our way out of it soon with good programs that will help people to develop good working environments, good benefits, because a lot of times people are not just there for the pay. They're there because they realize that what they're doing is important and that it's something bigger than themselves, and they're part of a community that they feel included in. So it's more than just pay, it's more than just going to work and coming and getting a paycheck. It's about being part of something.
I almost lost my balance.
And the 5-year program?
What's that?
I also asked about the 5-year wait.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna talk about a little bit. One of the things that's happening is that hospitals are backed up. They want to discharge people to rehab facilities, but the rehab facilities are full. So if somebody's in a rehab facility or waiting, what people call me and they ask about their loved one who's in a nursing home. They've been placed there after they left the hospital, and they're 2 hours away because that was the closest bed that they could get. So what is important, I think, is that there's a lot more availability in assisted living. The apartments turn over quite a bit, but nursing homes right now have a really significant wait list. So what I recommend you do is look around at the nursing homes. If you think you're going to run out of money, and get on the wait list. So we can do a math calculation and figure out based on your assets and your income and if you qualify for the veterans benefits and long-term care insurance, how long can you stay in any one of these different communities and at what price point? The 5-year look back is talking about your eligibility for Mass Health. I'm not an attorney, I am not a financial planner, I do play both on TV, but I'm not actually one. So the rule is that you can't give away your money any way you want and then move into a nursing home and say I'm impoverished. The government doesn't like that very much. So what they've done is they put in a 5-year look-back period. It used to be 3. We anticipate it could be 7 any day now. But there's a 5-year look-back period, meaning they're going to look back at your finances 5 years and make sure that you didn't spend. Though I have a story. There was a gentleman I was working with his daughter, but there was a gentleman I was working with. He sold his house for about $650,000, and he gave $300,000 to his son and $300,000 to his daughter, the one I was speaking with. The son bought a house. He put that money down on mostly a down payment and spent it on a house. A few years later, 3 years later, this gentleman had a stroke. And he had a lot of significant care needs, and his needs had to be met in a nursing home. But now he has to pay privately because he's not eligible for Mass Health because 5 years did not go by when he gave that money to his kids. So he has to pay privately in the nursing home, which is right now about $15,000 per month, way more than assisted living. And so it's important to plan ahead and look at your runway. That's what I call it, your runway. How long will your money last in any given scenario? I'm working with a lot of people right now who only have a couple years ability to pay privately in assisted living. And what we're doing is we're looking at 2 tracks. First one and then another. But one is to get into an assisted living. And then almost immediately, depending on your runway, if it's a couple years, almost immediately start looking at nursing homes and get your name on the wait list for all of the best ones in the area, which again, I can help you find which ones you want to apply to. That when it looks like you're going to run out of money, you're so far ahead of the game that hopefully you will be able to choose a facility that you're very happy with. People who wait until they actually have a need end up going to a facility that they feel is suboptimal. And then they can transfer when a bed at their preferred facility does open, but the wait list in nursing homes absolutely requires a little bit more planning than it used to. And we use assisted living, we use assisted living sort of as part of that planning cycle too. Did that answer your question?
No,
It
it's a
didn't.
totally different question.
Okay.
I didn't realize I forgot about that 5 years. I was talking about the assisted living places in this area. Yet if you go and visit them, they tell you it'll be 5 years, get on the list now and put a deposit down.
No.
There are a couple of places that have significant wait lists. They're the entry fee communities, and they had wait lists even before COVID. But most of them, if they have a wait list, it's going to be 3-4 months,
Right.
at most.
Mhm.
Is it important, like, to be in the area with your doctor and the hospital that you use?
It can, but a lot of times people change their doctors.
I don't
Yeah,
want
then
to.
it is important for you. Do you want to answer?
Yes. So many times there are people that end up moving to an assisted living community that's near their family.
Well, they're here.
Right, okay, so where you choose to live, that's your choice. If you want to stay in this area, then you would look for an assisted living community that would allow you to be able to access the services that you're already using right now. But we've had people that they have family that are nearby, and they move up here from Florida to live in assisted living to be close to family. Obviously, they have to change their doctors, they can't stay, but the thing is, they make these changes based upon where they want to live and what's most important to them. It's a very individual decision.
Before we take another question, I just wanted to introduce Mara
If you
Snyder.
can get one.
Mara is our outreach coordinator, and she can answer a lot of the questions that you have, so just give her a call. She'd be happy to help you. I also wanted to mention, Michelle referenced talking to an elder law attorney. We are having a program, just a little plug, next Tuesday, May 16th at 11 o'clock. And Denise Yurkovsky, who is an area elder law attorney, will be presenting. And she comes here every year, and she always has a wonderful presentation with a lot of very valuable information. So I encourage all of you to just sign up. You can do that today before you leave, or just give us a call or send us an email if you'd like to come to that program. Any other questions? Ray, did you have another part of your question?
No.
You're all set. Any other questions? Well, once again, I'd like to thank both Michelle and Lori for coming today. It was really a wonderful, wonderful program, and we got a lot of great information and a lot of great questions from the audience. So
Yes,
thank you both so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just one last thing is that we have one more workshop coming up, and it's going to be in 2 weeks. It's going to be on the 25th of May. 25th, yes, and it's going to be on alternative housing options. And this is something that's going to be a little bit different. So we have our own Wayland Building Commissioner is going to be talking about zoning requirements and accessory dwelling units, which are also sometimes called granny flats or in-law suites. And we also have somebody coming to talk about co-housing. And her name is Victoria Thatcher, and she's the co-founder of Hager Homestead Senior Co-Housing. And they're building a senior-only co-housing in Littleton right now, so that's kind of a very relevant topic. And also Anna Marie Pulsar, who is the president of Sharing Housing, and she's going to talk about home sharing, which is if you have a home and you have a room that you would like to share, as a way of maybe bringing in income or maybe even having somebody help you in the house. She'll be talking a little bit more about that. So hopefully all of you will join us in 2 weeks for that last of our housing workshops. So once again, thank you so much for coming today, and thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.